Tonight, change of tune. Rachel Reeves tells Labour Party conference next month's budget will have real ambition. After being criticised for being too downbeat, the Chancellor drops a big hint she could borrow more for big projects. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates will explain. Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Paymaster General, will be joining us live. I'll ask him if the government's now trying to sound less miserable. Also tonight, trying to spoil the party while the Chancellor was on her feet lauding the government's public sector pay rises. The Royal College of Nurses say their pay offer isn't good enough. I've been getting reaction from the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, and the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing. That's Nicola. And after Rachel Reeves' speech here was disrupted by a pro-Palestinian protester, we'll look at the tradition of conference disruption. All that and more with Margaret Hodge and Rachel Maskell, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Monday. I'm Sophy Ridge, live from the Labour conference in Liverpool, and this is the Politics Hub. Welcome to the Labour conference in Liverpool. Well, it's the first time that Labour has had a party conference while being in government for 24 years. But you know what struck me? The tone. It's very serious, even slightly severe. There's no celebration. And look, it's been a wobbly few weeks for Labour. Even they would admit that. And they know this is their big chance to change the narrative. So how are they doing? Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Her first conference speech as Chancellor. After months of doom and gloom about the state of the nation's economy, now reaching for a more hopeful message.
So believe me when I say, my optimism for Britain burns brighter than ever. My ambition knows no limits, because I can see the prize on offer if we make the right choices now.
The familiar promise of discipline and tough choices were here, but also a hint that she will be borrowing more rather than cutting back projects to get Britain going.
Growth is the challenge, and investment is the solution. Investment in new industries, new technologies, and new infrastructure.
Not backing down from her most controversial decision to date.
And I made the choice to means test the winter fuel payment, so that it's only targeted at those most in need. I know that not everyone in this hall or in the country will agree with every decision that I make. I will not duck those decisions.
That what applause in the hall, though not everyone looked thrilled.
I thought we were voting for change, Rachel.
An interruption from the floor as the Chancellor was heckled by a protester. Back on script and echoing a Gordon Brown line, a call to arms for her party.
That is the Britain I believe in. Together, let's go and build it.
A speech that was light on detail and policy, but a handbrake turn in tone. Labour knows the public are hungry for a little more hope. The watching cabinet got the message too.
Today's speech was showing the direction of travel. It was moving from a period from where we've been really honest and brutally upfront about the extent of challenge our country faces. She's told a story of change, and then soon we're going to get the budget where you're going to see a lot of detail about how we invest for the future. That's the key thing.
A Chancellor signalling more money for growth. But the spending taps aren't being turned on for everything. Just as Rachel Reeves got to her feet, nurses rejected a 5.5% pay rise and are now demanding more and aren't ruling out strike action. A new standoff begins. To get noticed, you've been deliberately embarrassed her, haven't you?
We haven't deliberately embarrassed her. That was not our intention. But what we do want to do is be listened to and come up with solutions, because 145,000 nurses have raised their voices.
That's just one of the many big tests ahead for the Chancellor. But what this conference wanted was a dose of optimism, and they got it. A month until her first budget. Will it last? Sam Coates, Sky News, Liverpool.
Well, Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins us now. And Sam, it's a big moment, isn't it? It's the first conference of government. Do you think we learnt much today?
Well, as I said in that film, Sophie, it was short on detail. But it was quite long on hints, and the hints are really important. You got a glimpse of that in that film, where she talked about investment and the priority of investment and growth. She said growth is the challenge and investment is the solution. Now, in 4 weeks' time, if she starts cutting back on investment, everyone's going to replay that section of the speech and go, what are you talking about? And I think therein that line betrays a shift that there's been in the Treasury in just a matter of weeks. Back before the summer, when Rachel Reeves made her first big intervention where she cut winter fuel payments to fill that £22 billion black hole, she was also ripping up a whole series of capital investment projects, road projects like the A303 transformation down to the southwest. I think that is a signal that that kind of approach has gone. And however they fill the £22 billion black hole, it will not be by cutting back on those things. But I've got a little bit more detail for you. I've been talking to people in government in the last 48 hours. And actually, I think there's a willingness to fill that £22 billion black hole, not just with welfare cuts, not just with spending cuts, not just with tax rises, but also with borrowing. Now, that might surprise people, and the government and the Treasury haven't finally decided to do that, but we could discover that they soften the blow, cushion the problem that they created for themselves by just borrowing more. And I think that is how Rachel Reeves potentially allows herself to be a bit more optimistic when the budget comes on October the 30th.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Do you think that it is a plan that was there all along? Do you think it's something that they've, I guess, tweaked? What's your suspicion?
Oh, goodness, no. It does not look like a plan that they'd all cleverly thought through before July the 22nd when the statement about winter fuel allowance and the initial cuts were made. No, I think there is a real sense of this government doing it on the hoof. I think that they have been taken aback by the scale of the backlash over the winter fuel payment means testing and are now more nervous about doing big cuts. And if you're not going to do big cuts, then what are you going to do? Well, you can't really tax that much because you've tied your hands on so many. You've got spending problems all over the place. If you can do extra borrowing within your fiscal rules, then isn't that the easiest way to play to the audience in front of Rachel Reeves today? Very, very interesting. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor. Well, I'm sure the newspapers tomorrow will have lots of analysis of Labour Party conference. We're going to have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us for that analysis will be the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, that's Liam Thorpe, and the political editor of the Daily Express, Sam Lister. We've been talking on the show today about whether or not there could be any tweaking of the fiscal rules or not, and the Chancellor's speech, of course. We can get a little bit more now from Nick Thomas-Symonds, who joins us now. Great to have you here.
Good to join you, Sophie.
How do you describe the atmosphere of conference?
I think what I'm seeing here at conference is a real sense of determination, actually. And of course there is. This is a conference where we've just won a landslide election victory. I've been to enough conferences in my time where we lost the previous general election. But I think there is a real sense of determination that we understand the scale of the challenge before us, but we are going to meet that challenge and build a better Britain, which is what Rachel Reeves was setting out in what I thought was an excellent speech from her today.
I just want to talk a bit about that Rachel Reeves speech, and actually one specific line. So in her speech she said, growth is a challenge and investment is the solution. Now that, to me, felt like the most important line in Rachel Reeves' speech. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, she's always spoken about the need to deliver change. She's always spoken about stability, investment and reform as the things that we need. So that's not a new line that she's come up with today. That's something she's been talking about for some years. Now, for investment, what do you need? Do you need, for example, foreign direct investment into the UK? And to do that, you've got to have a Britain that has a high international reputation and has stable economic foundations. I shadowed the international trade brief for a couple of years, and when I was doing that job, people were looking at me in astonishment as to what was going on in Britain that the last government was producing such unstable conditions. So of course we need investment has to be part of it. And just one point. We've already, in Rachel Reeves' 11 weeks as Chancellor, seen the setting up already of the National Wealth Fund. We've got GB Energy already going through the House of Commons. So that work to attract and generate investment is beginning.
So look, it's one thing to say, she's always said this, there's been no shift, it's always been about stability and investment. But look, there is a live debate, and I'm not just talking about for this government, for all governments, about the tension between getting debt down and stability and iron discipline, as Rachel Reeves puts it, and growth and investment and capital spending. Is Rachel Reeves tending towards the latter now?
No, I think
because it's a big challenge. You know, I think I mean this really seriously, because for me this is the big challenge of this government.
So what Rachel Reeves is doing is firstly putting the economy on a stable footing for this financial year. This financial year, we've discovered a black hole in the finances of £22 billion. And as Rachel said very clearly in her speech today, if we don't fix that in this financial year, we are putting the stability of the economy at risk, and it is then we will have issues with mortgages, putting pensions at risk, and it will be working people to pay the price. So what she was saying today was, yes, we have to take those tough decisions now, but she was also talking about the Britain of opportunity and enterprise.
Okay.
We want to build upon those foundations. But you can't, you've only got to look what happened with Liz Truss in September 2022 to see what happens when you take reckless risks for the public finances.
She's going to change the fiscal rules, isn't she? That to me is the hint today. And I'm not talking about ripping up the fiscal rules, but I'm talking about that debt rule. Because, you know, Andy Haldane, for example, former chief economist of the Bank of England, told me he thinks the debt rule should be changed to weight assets as well as liabilities. So in other words, if you build a hospital, that effectively is taken off the debt balance sheet. You record it, you log it. That's what she's going to do, isn't it?
No. What Rachel has always spoken about is iron discipline around those fiscal rules, and I didn't detect any change of message around that today. In fact, what I think you saw today was Rachel Reeves speaking about the kind of
She said it's time the Treasury moved on from
opposition.
just counting the costs of investment in our economy to recognising the benefits too.
Yes, well, that's entirely correct. And she also was speaking about other aspects of investment. For
You don't
example,
think she can change them? You don't?
She said...
I'm going to come back to you in a month, you know.
Well, she said it does matter where we make things and where we sell things. And again, we've often spoken about, when we were in opposition, we were speaking about buying, making and selling more in Britain, and that was very much the theme of her speech again today.
Can I talk to you a little bit about the other story, I guess, that has been the backdrop to conference, which is the gifts, freebies, some people might say. I mean, what's your take on politicians accepting clothes? Do you think it's acceptable or not?
With these types of things, gifts and hospitality, the hugely important thing is the transparency, okay? And we can have this debate because of things that are declared, and I think that is hugely important to our politics. Now, of course, Rachel, Angela and Keir have all now said that they won't, now they're in government, continue to take donations for clothing, and, you know, they've said that quite clearly. But obviously, I would much prefer to be here talking to you about government policy than I would about these gifts. And I think what you saw from Rachel today, actually, was sketching out exactly what she wants to do in terms of fixing the foundations and then building prosperity and opportunity afterwards.
The clothes were donated by Lord Ali. He also got a number 10 pass for a few weeks. That was rescinded. Now, our correspondent Serena bumped into him at conference, and when she tried to ask him about the donations, he said, please don't, that's not very nice. I mean, you're there saying that transparency is really important. It is important, isn't it?
Well, yes, and it is transparent. You know about the donations.
If he's saying, you know, please don't ask me about this, it's not very nice.
Well, look, I don't really know the context and where that was said, and obviously, but in respect of Lord Ali, he's a Labour peer, has been a Labour peer since 1998. You know, he's got over a quarter of a century of public service. And also, we do have a system in this country. We don't fund our political parties through the state. We don't ask the taxpayer to do this. And people do make donations to political parties. And, of course, that was a situation in opposition, and they did so because they wanted a Labour government.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thomas-Symonds there. Always good to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The former Labour Cabinet Minister, Baroness Hodge of Barking, and the Labour MP, Rachel Maskell. Great to have you both here on the show. Margaret, to you first. How do you describe the mood of conference today?
Well, the first thing I want to celebrate is the fact that Rachel was there. After 800 years, we have got a woman Chancellor of the Exchequer, and I think we should note that. And she demonstrated massive confidence and control, and you had confidence in her. So that's the first thing. Second thing, the mood of conference. I thought her contribution today was really important, and to build up on this. She's always said growth is the mission. If you're going to get growth, you've got to invest, whether it's investing in infrastructure, whether it's investing in research, whether it's investing in skills. And I think she was beginning to show that. So investment for those sort of things, I don't think it is actually investment to fill gaps that there are in current spending. That isn't really very sensible. But if it's investment for growth, I'm all with her. And I was really pleased because of my mission of trying to get rid of dirty money out of and fraud and all those horrible things that we have in Britain. I was really pleased to see the work that she's going to do around COVID. It is outrageous. There's a report out today by Transparency International in which they have looked at all those COVID contracts, and they have found over 15 billion in those contracts where they think there were 3 or more red flags that suggested the contracts were badly led, either to people who were Tory donors, or the process was right, or it was companies that had just been set up, or they didn't give the output that they were supposed to give under the contract. So I thought that was great. So I feel, and the other thing I've got to say, honestly, we're celebrating. For God's sake, I walk around this conference. I mean, I'm now no longer a member of the House of Commons, but seeing these young things, there's so much new talent in the Labour Party. I just hope that they all, there will be enough for them all to do so they can all contribute. There's real excitement. People who never thought they'd be there are now in part of the the party of government.
Rachel, I'm really interested from your perspective, because look, there is a big economic challenge here. Labour is setting out their stall, trying to work out what they're going to prioritise. Is it going to be getting spending under control? Is it going to be investment for growth? Is it going to be all the different things that they have to work out? Do you think they've got it about right?
Well, I think after 14 years in opposition, clearly the government is really eager to press on with the role of government. We haven't really had a government over the last few years, so there is so much reparation which is needed as well. And I think what the Chancellor was setting out today is like, we need to fix this country, each of the spending departments obviously having its own challenges, whilst at the same time, I read a speech that's like, this is our 10-year plan. This is about a 10-year government, which is really ambitious, not just on the national scale, but also internationally. And I think what I particularly pulled out of her speech was about the industrial investment, that having that industrial strategy, which we've seen one come and go several times under the last administration, but really to have that plan of growth, which will then obviously not only stabilise the economy, but give the opportunity for those good quality jobs, which we know we desperately need in our constituencies.
Are you worried about, like some on the left are, about, I guess, the control over spending? Some people describe it as austerity.
Well, we've got to ensure that we have control over spending. We saw what happened on the Liz Truss. We absolutely need to build the confidence in our economy, ensuring that those interest rates do come down, that we are able to get those mortgages down as well, because that impacts on people's pockets, and we need to help people right at this time. But from having that stability, of course, you can grow out of that, and that's what we need to achieve. However, I do recognise that over this course of government, we really need to think through what a future taxation system needs to look at. How do we get greater equity in our system? How do we ensure that wealth that so many people sit on is part of it as well? So there's a lot of work to be done, but stabilisation is the first step.
Thanks both very much. I'll have lots more from both of you as the programme continues. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. Well, it wouldn't be a Labour conference without an anti-war protester. As the Chancellor was in full flow, bashing the Tories, a heckler took to his feet to criticise Labour for selling arms to Israel. We'll be looking at the grand tradition of protesting at party conferences later in the programme. Well, the heckler may not have derailed Rachel Reeves, but the news that nurses have rejected a pay deal coming midway through her speech wasn't ideal for the Chancellor. We'll hear from the Royal College of Nurses. That's next.
App gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast equivalent of a Pro Plus caffeine tablet that tells you everything about what you need to know the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico. With me in the Zoom call is Sam Coates of Sky News.
The front runner among the members, Kelly Badenoch, did much worse than I was expecting. Now, traditionally and historically, MPs want to rush to back early the front-runner candidate because it helps your chances of getting a job further down the track. It's good to be seen to be there early with the person who's going to win. And the fact that even though she was topping a lot of the surveys, that she didn't get more than 6 votes behind Robert Jenrick is very ominous for her campaign.
This issue had sort of bubbled away a bit last week. It was always going to come back this week because of the vote, but it was rather blown up again on Thursday due to a very prominent Labour Party commentator wading in on it and saying that Rachel Reeves might need an escape route. Now, that person was Ed Balls, who used possibly one of the most prominent Labour figures to speak about Treasury matters.
Oh my God.
What happened?
Sorry, I've got my cat is fighting another cat through the window. I'm going to have to stop it.
There's a cat fight.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, and we'll have more from the Labour Party conference in just a moment. But first, I want to give you an update on the situation in Lebanon, because the Lebanese Health Ministry says more than 350 people have been killed in Israeli strikes against Hezbollah targets. Well, Iran's president has tonight accused Israel of seeking a wider war in the Middle East and laying traps to lead his country into a wider conflict. We can speak now to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. In the last few minutes, we heard from Daniel Hadgari. Deborah, what's happening?
Yeah, so he's the Israel Defence Forces spokesperson, and he's been updating on this significant round of strikes that the military has been conducting over the past day, saying that that the Israeli forces have been taking out Hezbollah munition sites, long-range, short-range missiles and rockets. The Defence Minister said that in the past day, the Israelis have taken out tens of thousands of these rockets, saying that they have managed to dismantle a significant proportion of the munitions that Hezbollah had been building up since the last Lebanon war back in 2006, saying that the events over the past week, which of course began with the booby trap of pagers and walkie-talkies, that shock attack that Israel has been blamed for but has never confirmed nor denied it was part of that, followed by these strikes. The Defence Minister saying that the Israeli military has dealt the biggest blow on Hezbollah since its formation. However, the spokesperson, Daniel Hadgari, when he was speaking just now, was saying, and also the Defence Minister too, that clearly there is a sense of the potential for retaliation, saying that the Israeli military is ready to respond to alert the public should there be strikes from Hezbollah coming in this direction. There have, of course, been significant strikes in the north during the day, but clearly this is a country on high alert for what will come next.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Deborah Haynes there, speaking to us from Jerusalem. Return now to Labour Party conference, because as we saw earlier, Rachel Reeves' speech was somewhat disrupted by the announcement while she was on stage that the Royal College of Nurses had rejected the government's 5.5% pay rise offer in England. Well, just after the speech, I caught up with the Culture Secretary, Nandy. Great to have you on Sky News today. What do you make of the timing of this announcement by the Royal College of Nursing? They obviously waited just when the Chancellor was talking about how great it was that you guys have got all these pay deals and stopping the strikes to say, no, actually, no, thank you. We've rejected this.
Well, I've just hot-footed it over here from the hall where you will have seen the response in the room to what Rachel Reeves just talked about. She talked about how we hadn't wasted a minute in fixing the foundations. We'd brought an end to the long-running dispute over junior doctors. We'd taken action to start resolving the issues on our railways. And I think the country is right behind us. It's been a tough decade and a half for nurses, for all of our public servants, and for people in the private sector as well. But we've given public sector workers a real terms pay rise for the first time in a long time. We've done it not just because they deserve it, though they do, but we've done it because it's good for the economy. Every pound that you put back into the pockets of working people goes back onto our high streets and helps our local economies to thrive. So we're really confident about what we're doing. We'll of course continue to discuss these issues with the nurses and with other parts of our workforce as well, recognising that it's been really tough times. But the energy in that room today was overwhelmingly positive about the journey that this country is now on.
I will absolutely get onto the speech in a minute, but the question was about the timing of this. This was deliberately timed to cause maximum embarrassment and damage to the Chancellor. And it comes at a time when Unite are putting out press releases saying that they're really unhappy by how they perceive the Labour Party to be blocking a vote that they want to put on winter fuel allowances. I mean, you guys have only been in power 2 months. It feels like the relationship with the unions have already completely broken down.
The relationships with the unions haven't broken down at all. There's a really positive mood at this conference. Unions have a right and a duty to speak up on behalf of their members, and they will always make the case for our workers. But what we've got in Labour now is a Labour government that stands with our workers. There was a standing ovation for the Chancellor in the hall just now when she talked about making work pay through our new deal for working people. She talked about the pay rise that we've already given to public sector workers. She talked about the partnership that we're building with workers and with businesses and with mayors and councils all over the country. And every single part of that hall got to their feet and applauded, because that's a vision that every single one of us is completely behind.
I want to talk a little bit about the wider kind of economic argument, because Rachel Reeves was saying that yes, you need iron discipline, but she also said there'd be no return to austerity. I'm trying to work out, what does austerity mean to you? Because a lot of people will be looking at the spending plans, and in particular the cuts for unprotected departments, saying, well, if it looks like austerity and smells like austerity, it is austerity, isn't it?
Well, in 2010, George Osborne and David Cameron put forward an argument that they believed that the state had grown out of proportion to Britain. They believed it was crowding out the market, and they wanted to see the state pull back. Rachel Reeves is making a very different argument today. She's saying to the country that we believe in active government walking alongside communities and businesses in every part of Britain to grow our economy.
What is austerity?
Well, austerity was an ideological choice to make cuts because they believed it would be better for Britain. It wasn't better for Britain. If our economy had grown at the same rate as the OECD average, we would be billions and billions of pounds.
You guys want to make cuts too. It doesn't matter about the reasons.
We absolutely don't.
So you want to just, are you going to cancel the cuts planned for unprotected departments then?
We're going to fill that £22 billion black hole, because as Rachel said in the hall today, unless you create economic stability, you don't create the conditions in which people want to invest in Britain. Next month we'll hold an international investment summit. We'll be joined by people from all over the world who are investing in things like film, TV, gaming, some of our fastest growing industries in this country. And the reason that they're prepared to do that again is because we're ending the Tory chaos and unfunded commitments and instability that this country has had to deal with for too long.
Interview there with the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Well, we get a bit more now on nurses in England rejecting the government's latest pay award of 5.5%. They urged ministers to start pay negotiations as soon as possible. I spoke to the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, Professor Nicola Ranger. Great to have you on. The first time I've interviewed you, so thank you for being on Sky News today. Just talk us through what's happened, what you've rejected, or the nurses, I should say, have rejected the pay deal.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We asked our nursing staff what they felt and what they thought about their pay. And they've come back in record numbers. Over 145,000 responded to say, actually, for all the challenges in nursing and that nursing is facing, it just isn't enough to actually make a difference to themselves, the patients, and the NHS as a whole.
Is this partly because nurses have seen what junior doctors have managed to get and thought, hang on a minute, this isn't enough?
I think our nursing staff recognised that the junior doctors, their pay award was hard fought. They went on strike 11 times to get that pay award, and we wouldn't remotely begrudge them that. However, we absolutely recognise the government's assessment of the NHS. Many nursing staff that I've spoken to recently and generally recognise that whatever sector we look at in the NHS, it's not providing the care that it needs. So what they want is where pay, conditions actually makes a seismic difference for themselves and the NHS.
I was interested where you say that the junior doctors' pay deal was hard fought and that they went on strike a lot of times. Is that what nurses are prepared to do as well? Are you prepared to strike in order to get the pay deal that you think is right?
At this moment in time, we don't want to go on strike. We just want to be listened to, taken seriously. And what our nursing staff have told us is that it isn't enough, but we want to be part of the solution, and that's where we want to go. What we
doesn't
want
sound
is
like you're doesn't sound like you're ruling it out, though.
We can never fully rule that out, but as a first start, what we want is to be part of the solution. Nursing staff believe in the NHS. They want it to work. They recognise it's failing for patients, and actually they want to be part of the solution. But to do that, whether it's community, whether it's mental health or acute care, nursing has to be at the centre. And we've got too many structural problems that need sorting out, of which pay is part of that.
And if you don't get the pay that you want, I understand that you hope the government comes back and says, yep, no problem, we'll give you a pay rise. If you don't, striking is on the table for nurses.
At this moment in time, we don't want it to be. It is always something that we have in our toolkit, but what we really want to do, we know that patients have had enough at the moment. The satisfaction in the NHS is the lowest in its history. We do want to be part of that solution. We've got a new government. I've written to the Secretary of State with suggestions around what we want to get things better. At this moment, what I've heard loud and clear from nurses across England and the rest of the UK is we want to be seen as part of the solution. But with the vacancies we have, the huge number, the drop in of people going into the profession and the huge numbers of nurses leaving, something has to change, and we need change.
Can I talk to you about the timing of this announcement? Because the press release dropped. I mean, I was sitting in this seat. You know, the press release dropped just as Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was giving her first speech as Chancellor, just as she was talking about securing a deal with public sector public sector workers. You dropped the bombshell. I mean, that was deliberately timed, wasn't it, to cause maximum embarrassment?
That wasn't our intention. We finished our pay ballot on Friday. We let both the government and the Treasury know a week ago that we will be announcing the outcome of our ballot today. So it was not trying to cause maximum damage.
Come on, I wasn't born yesterday. It's not just a magic coincidence that it happened just as she was there. You wanted to, maybe maximum embarrassment is the words, not the words you chose, but that was a deliberate timing, right?
It wasn't a deliberate timing, but we did feel when so many nurses have spoken out around their pay, they do want change. They do want things to be different.
It was a magical coincidence, was it? It was just as the Chancellor was speaking.
Genuinely it was. However, we'd always planned for to release this out to our members today because they needed to hear the outcome of their ballot, with it closing on Friday. Look, we want to be part of this solution. We do recognise that the government has been really clear and we agree with the state of the NHS. And all we want to do is start those negotiations, to start being able to say, what can we do to get things better for nursing? Because whatever the government want to do, without nursing at the centre, it's going to be extremely difficult.
Can I talk to you a bit more widely about what you make of the government's first few months in office? Because I think it's probably fair to say that some other union leaders have been, I guess, quite frustrated with what they see as a potential return to austerity. Obviously, the government would dispute that language, but they're worried. They don't feel like this is a Labour government that so far is committed to delivering for workers. What's your own view?
I actually applaud the fact that with Lord Darcy, West Streeting has given what we feel is a fair diagnosis of what's going on within the NHS. Many nursing staff recognise what's in that report with regard to the care that is currently being delivered. So actually, I think we want to do things better. Many nursing staff have worked under a Labour government in the past. Although the Royal College of Nursing is not politically affiliated, we do remember when satisfaction for the NHS was at 70%, when diagnostic pathway meant something, when waiting times meant something. And actually, it is really quite shocking. You know, I've been out and about looking at the experience of patients. It is shocking to be in a corridor for hours and hours upon end. It's shocking to have patients that are potentially having a stroke sitting in a chair for hours on end, extra beds on wards in front of fire escapes. And actually, I think we recognise the shocking state of things. So we do think the government has been right to highlight that. And what nurses want to do is be part of that solution.
Some of our viewers might be listening to this now thinking, you're saying that the state of the NHS is shocking. If nurses go on strike, that's only going to make the patient experience even worse.
And I completely agree with that. That's why we are reluctant at this moment to be threatening strike action. What we want is proper, genuine dialogue with this government and with West Streeting to say, what can we do together to make a seismic change to sort out the real challenges for nursing staff in this country. We have to recruit and retain brilliant nursing staff. And at the moment, there is not enough seismic change to make a big impact for themselves, their patients, or the NHS. That's what we want.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme today. Right, let's bring in Margaret and Rachael again, shall we? Lots to unpick there. Rachael, I just wonder what your view is on where the government's relationship is with the unions, because it feels to me like, you know, Unite are fuming about the winter fuel cuts. You've got there the Royal College of Nursing. I mean, look, she says it was a coincidence, but, you know, releasing their press release right at the time of the Chancellor's speech. Are you worried about that relationship?
Well, it's really important, first of all, on this issue of pay, to recognise year after year under the Tories, NHS workers and our public sector workers barely got 1%, and that was a real fight. And of course, getting the 5.5% is a massive step forward. But we must recognise public sector workers have seen pay regression over a long time. And of course, they're feeling the cost of living now, not least when they're having to work within a very broken system. So unions are going to voice that. And what I heard from that interview is that nurses want to be part of the solution. How we put the NHS back together again, which is, of course, what Labour will do. We did it last time when the NHS was on its knees. I worked in it at the time, and we will do it again. It's going to take time, but with the right investment in the right places, it will happen. So unions are a very good tool for the government to work with, because those people they represent are the people which deliver for government. And ultimately, these are the people who have got the solutions. They know how it works on the ground. They can articulate that. And of course, they need looking after as well. And it's not just about pay. It's about the conditions they're working in. I've met with the nurses in my local hospital. They were so broken because they just couldn't nurse in the way that they were trained to and wanted to, and to put that care in. So it's really important to work with those unions, because they will ultimately deliver for government.
Do you have sympathy for nurses? I mean, I guess they might be looking at junior doctors, looking at train drivers, thinking, hang on a minute, we get a bit more money.
Yeah, I have sympathy for all of those working in the public sector. I mean, the difference between now and 1997, when we came in, is that the state of all public services is just so dire. You know, health is worse today than it was in 97, but you can look at local government, you can look at defence, you can look at education, everywhere. So the extent of the investment is massive, and the state of the economy is not where it was in 1997. So we are going to have to put those basics in place to start growing, to get the income in. And the nurses do have to be part. The only thing I would slightly, I'm sure Rachel will agree with this, My view is to move forward with the NHS, of course it's partly about money, but it's also about reform, it's about changing the way we work, maybe sort of weekend working, evening work, you know, evening shifts and all that sort of stuff, which will actually suit some nurses, you know, who have got caring responsibilities. And so it's an invest and reform agenda that we need to go forward.
Look at social care. The last government didn't touch it, and of course, unclogging the back door of the hospital will make the NHS flow so much better.
Not really touching it either, is it?
Well, it's certainly on our agenda. Of course, we've got to get that right, but also we've got to move that work into the community. And I was really pleased that Wes recognised that we can't keep stacking up the NHS secondary care, our big hospitals, but actually pulling stuff out so that we get those flows, so people can access those services again, which clearly at the moment people are waiting time and time again.
Thanks both very much indeed. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. A heckler bundled out of the hall as much at traditional party conferences as overpriced bacon rolls and hangovers. We'll look at political protests later in the programme. There are also heckles coming from outside the hall too, as pensioners gathered to express their anger over cuts to the winter fuel allowance. More on that next. Hello, welcome back. Well, one of the issues overshadowing this conference is anger over the cut to winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. Protesting pensioners gathered outside the conference hall in Liverpool. Well, in July, the Chancellor announced plans to scrap winter fuel payments for around 10 million pensioners. The decision means that all pensioners, aside from those in receipt of pension credit or other means-tested benefits, will no longer get winter fuel payments. They're worth between £100 and £300. Well, Sky News spoke to a campaigner about the changes.
We're glad to be here despite the bad weather. It won't dampen our spirit. The protest will continue. The demand is quite clear. They need to restore that allowance. If they want to make tough decisions, make a tough decision, tax the rich.
You're going to lose the winter fuel allowance. Just speaking personally, how do you feel about it?
Absolutely outrageous. I've paid my taxes, as has millions of others. As far as we're concerned, they need to restore the decision. End of story.
Well, let's bring back in Margaret and Rachael, shall we? Margaret, how much of an issue do you think this is, winter fuel payments? It does feel, I'll be honest, a lot of MPs are worried about it. Do you think that the government could change its course?
I think the postbags are full. I have to say, and it's the one thing I might disagree with Rachael of tonight, is that I don't think, giving Alan Sugar 300-400 quid a year, or me, I get it too. I don't need it. And if you're looking to save money, now you can argue maybe it could have been done in a slightly different way, but Rachael felt she had to do it this year. I don't think it's a terribly bad change in policy. When we brought it in, we didn't have pensioner credit, actually. We couldn't afford to bring in pensioner credit. We had a lot of really hard-up pensioners. There was real pensioner poverty in society, and this was one of the ways that Gordon felt he could afford to do it. But when I look at it today, whatever people do with the 300-400 quid that they get, I believe that we should not be helping the rich. And in helping me, I don't need it. And Alan Sugar certainly doesn't need it. So I do support what she's done. And she had to do it this year because she's got to get the money in this year because she's got an in-year deficit. Now, you might have wanted a different way of doing it, but I don't think the policy's wrong.
You've obviously spoken out against this, right? You believe that it's not the right course, and you abstained on the vote as well. How has that gone down with Labour HQ?
Well, clearly the whips want you to vote in their direction. However, I couldn't cross that Rubicon because whilst I completely agree with Margaret about many people, 5 and 6 pensioners don't need the pension credit, but there are people that do, the winter fuel payment, but there are people that do, and it's a lifeline for them. And even by the government's own assessment, the DWP, they've said that 780,000 pensioners this year, despite all of their efforts, and I admire their mission to get people signed up to pension credit, 780,000 will not do that in time to get the winter fuel payments. They are likely not to flick the switch and keep themselves warm.
Unite are angry about this, right? They want a vote in the conference hall, and they're very unhappy about the timing of that vote as well, because they said it should have been today, and they're accusing Labour of basically putting it on what they classed as the kind of graveyard shift on Wednesday when everyone's left and no one's paying any attention anymore. I mean, Rachael, what do you think about that? Do you think the timing is a bit...
Well, it should have come today because it's part of that economic argument. The debate today was around the economy, so you would normally take the motions associated with that in order of business. So I would have expected it to have come part of the mix today. I think postponing it to Wednesday, probably the story continues further, so it would have been better to close that down and know where the government is. The vote will come clearly on Wednesday. We'll know the outcome for this. But my concern is not the semantics of what just happens in this place, but my concern is about what happens when old people are going cold, their body fights against the cold, more at risk of heart attack and stroke, and that's the medical evidence, and then putting pressure on our NHS, or even those tragic stories. And I just don't want that to happen. So I want to ensure that we are protecting people. And I've said a social tariff, social prescribing, and the pilot's absolutely brilliant at showing it's cost effective, but really targets those people most at risk. And we need to put some mitigation in place.
Well, I would simply say that campaign for pensioner credit is really important, making sure that people take what they're entitled to. I think gone are the days of universality. I would rather use that money. I'd rather use it on the 2-child benefit, and that's the honest, because that's an area where I think the poverty is hitting much harder. And you've got to accept that, poverty is after 14 years. There's a lot of things we've got to do. But you might think about, Rachel, if you said tax it, give it and tax it. That might be an easier way through this. But honestly, Alan Sugar should not get,
I think we're in agreement on that.
And he does. Under the system, he does.
Thanks both very much indeed. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Not a party of protest, the Chancellor hits back at a heckler. We'll discuss the grand old tradition of political heckling. That's next.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited. I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolution. It's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Hello, welcome back to The Politics Hub. We're live from the Labour conference in Liverpool. Now, it wouldn't be a conference without hecklers and protesters. And in the middle of her speech, Rachel Reeves was interrupted.
They paid the price for their incompetence, their dishonesty and their law breaking.
Well, the Chancellor responded by echoing Keir Starmer when his speech, of course, was interrupted last year, that time with a bit more glitter, saying that Labour is not a party of protest. So we thought we'd remind you of some other examples of the grand old tradition of heckling politicians when they're mid-flow.
You gotta fight for your right! Don't spoil it, sir. Don't spoil it, sir. Politics needs an update!
We are the only party.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, to see in this what we want.
What's that noise? Oh, mom, you're just jealous. It's the Beastie Boys. You gotta fight for your right.
Right, let's bring in Margaret and Rachel, shall we? I mean, they've all been coming back to us, haven't they? I have to say, all the different moments of protest and disruption. It's an art in learning how to deal with it, I think, isn't there? You were talking about a few that you remembered.
I was talking, this is real history, but I was remembering 1985 in Bournemouth when Neil Kinnock got up and made that speech against militant in Liverpool and attacked Liverpool. And Eric Heffer, now this is a blast from the past, who I think was treasurer of the Labour Party, walked off the stage. It was a very dramatic moment. I also remember myself protesting when I was leader. I was leader of Islington Council, and this was the time of Thatcher's cuts on local authorities and rate capping and all that sort of stuff. And we were invited to talk about inner city regeneration by Michael Heseltine. And we thought this was so hypocritical because he'd just cut all our money. And then he was talking about regeneration, that a troop of us inner London leaders came off that. And then I also remembered Tony Blair. Do you remember the Women's Institute?
Oh, that's a difficult audience if ever I heard one.
So there's lots of memories.
Yeah.
And I think actually, in a way, we remember, it brings things to life. And also, it's a sort of bit of element. It's democracy, isn't it? We're a country where that is allowed to happen, and we take it in good spirit.
And I personally think when humour is used with protests as well, it's really memorable. So that clip of Theresa May with the P45, I mean, who could forget that conference before the letters fell off the stage? But we've got to be able to have that freedom of speech and to use it creatively. And my goodness, women would never have had the vote had they not stood by and protested. So I always value that ability to protest. But I think that was quite heavy-handed today, it looked in the hall. But of course, security is an issue, which is a very serious issue. But at the same time, if we can combine it with humour, then we can enjoy the moment, but recognise the serious message as well behind it.
That's the difficult, isn't it? Because look, there is obviously a security issue, and I do think the Keir Starmer incident with the glitter, we can look back on it because he dealt with it so well at the time. But actually, it must be quite frightening.
Well, I had one situation. It's all coming back to me now. where this was when I was Minister for Children, and I was speaking at a conference in Manchester about divorce, separation and divorce, to a whole bunch of lawyers. And I got up at the front, and suddenly I was handcuffed by a Fathers for Justice.
Oh, blimey!
Fathers for Justice protester, and he'd put some sort of glue in it that we couldn't take off, so I had to wait for the police to...
We're out of time. I could talk about this a lot. We'll have to do that later. Always good to have you both on the programme. Thank you for being there. That is it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 for more coverage, of course, of the conference.